Hey everyone, welcome to part 2 of my March wrap-up. I'm going to start off by talking about White Tears by Hari Kunzru. This was a new release that I was excited to get around to, but it completely disappointed me. This is the story of two white guys that are obsessed with black music and culture, and they will only listen to music by black artists because it's the only music that has any authenticity. So I thought this was going to be a book basically making fun of these guys, and it was going to be this kind of pointed novel about race relations, but it ended up being more of a horror novel than I was expecting. So they have this recording of this black man singing a blues song on the streets of New York City, and they upload it online and pretend that it's this ancient blues recording, and it turns out that it actually is that blues recording, and then bad stuff starts happening and it really gets crazy, and it's like, is this blues musician from the past trying to kill them through his music? What's happening? So yeah, this book was a hot mess. The main character is one of those mysterious people that's shy and doesn't tell you a lot about themselves. So he just ended up being really boring, and he has this totally predictable, annoying crush on his best friend's sister, who's this rich girl, but she's actually really deep and interested in art. So these characters were just so not interesting, and the story was so crazy that this is a book that I just did not enjoy, didn't really understand, and will probably never read again. Two other books I read this month that gave me a lot of confusing negative feelings were The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss, and they are the first two books in the as of yet unfinished Kingkiller Chronicle. So it has been a hella long time since I have picked up a proper fantasy novel, and I thought these ones would be good ones to try because my boyfriend had just read them and he really liked them, as well as I looked them up on Goodreads and they had crazy high ratings. We're talking 4.5 and above. That just does not happen very often. So I thought these would be perfect books to get me back into reading fantasy, but oh my god, they made me so mad in a lot of different ways. I think it was because I hated the main character, Kavoth. Basically, these books are him telling his life story, and he is this well-known guy of legends. So there are all these myths about Kvothe and everything that he's done, but he's here to give you the real story. So he's you think it happened like this, but here's what actually happened. And I just found him to be insufferable. He is so full of himself. He is so egotistical. He is so smarmy and superior that it just really drove me crazy. It doesn't help that his character is actually good at everything, apparently. So yeah, he does all these epic things. He's smarter than everyone else at the university that he goes to, even though he's only 15 years old. He's also the greatest musician in the world. So, he loves to talk about music and say, oh, but you probably wouldn't understand. And then in the second book, he loses his virginity and he becomes the best person at sex ever. So that's even more annoying. So I don't know if it was just me, but I don't enjoy wish fulfillment in books. That's not the reason that I read books. I don't really care about awesome things happening to these awesome people who are good at everything. That did not make for an interesting character for me. I didn't think that he developed. I didn't think that he had very interesting reflections on the things that he was done. So these books were kind of a big fail for me in a lot of ways. I don't even want to get started talking about the misogyny in these books because it's just going to make me mad, but I feel like I have to mention it. Patrick Rothfuss cannot write a female character to save his life, and as a female reader, I just felt angry and alienated a lot of the time. I'd like to read a passage for you that highlights a lot of this problematic writing about women. This is from chapter 107 in A Wise Man's Fear. Sometimes a man enjoys a symphony. Else times he finds a jig more suited to his taste. The same holds true for love-making. One type is suited to the deep cushions of a twilight forest glade. Another comes quite naturally tangled in the sheets of narrow beds upstairs in inns. Each woman is like an instrument, waiting to be learned, loved, and finally played, to have at last her own true music made. Some might take offense at this way of seeing things, not understanding how a trooper views his music. They might think I degrade women. They might consider me callous, or boorish, or crude, but those people do not understand love, or music, or me. What? I can't even begin to unpack that passage, as if a woman's true music will never be discovered unless some guy bangs her properly. Oh my God. And then what really drove me crazy was the way that he's like, some of you might be offended, but that's just because you don't understand. And it's like, yeah, just because you acknowledge that you are coming across as a dick does not change the fact that you're still being a dick and a sexist piece of shit. And I hated the way that he tried to like justify his misogynistic point of view by saying, you just don't understand women or me, which is like, that's such bullshit, and that it was the lamest thing you could possibly say. So as you can see, these books elicited a lot of strong emotional reactions in me, but I will say that even though there was a lot of things that I hated, I still read about 2,000 pages of this story over the course of these two books, and if they were truly terrible garbage, there's no way that I would have been able to do that. So there was still enough that was like engaging and exciting about the plot that kept me turning the pages. I think there is a good story buried in here somewhere. I just wish that the main character was not such a douchebag, as well as the second book, The Wise Man's Fear, needed to be heavily edited. This book is just too long, and the plot's just like a tangent. It just goes on into different episode. They're very loosely linked, and it did not come together nicely. So, you know, there's good stuff in here, but unfortunately you have to go through a lot of boring and aggravating stuff to get to it. But also, what the hell do I know? I mean, like, it seems like mostly everyone really loves these books. So if you have any convincing arguments, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to chat more about these books. And last up, I have two nonfiction books. The first one is Headscarves and Hymens, Why the Middle East Needs a Sexual Revolution. And I first heard about this book from Crystal Marsh's channel, so I will link her down below because I think she is incredible. But I'm really glad that I took her recommendation and read this because I learned a lot about what is going on in the Middle East and why we don't really talk about that a lot in the West. And Mona Eltahaway is very critical about this silence and acceptance that happens in the West, because I find a lot of people don't want to be offensive, right? Like, you don't want to come across like you're bashing someone else's culture, and you don't want to sound like Islamophobic for criticizing a lot of these sexist practices that are going on. But Mona made me realize that silence is often complicity. So by trying to back off and not be offensive, sometimes you're sending across the message that it's okay what's going on in the Middle East, when really, in a lot of cases, it's not. Mona Eltahaway fearlessly takes on a lot of controversial topics, such as female genital mutilation, whether women should wear the veil, and how a lot of Middle Eastern cultures are obsessed with preserving a woman's virginity, often at the cost of her own freedom or life. So a lot of these topics are going to make you mad, they're going to make you upset, but you're also going to learn a lot. You can tell that she's a journalist because she backs up her stories with a lot of facts, but she also includes a narrative element. So she will usually incorporate her own personal perspective and use her own experiences in her story, as well as she includes the perspective of other women who are currently living in these situations. I really liked the empowering message at the heart of this book, and Mona convinces us that feminism is not some Western import, and there have always been feminist thinkers in these Middle Eastern countries, and she includes a lot of material by these feminists, so it's cool to learn about these ladies who have been doing badass things for a long time. But she ultimately believes that it is going to be Middle Eastern women driving the change that needs to happen, so it does end on that hopeful note, so that even though things are not right now, these women are going to one day eventually rise up and demand change. The last nonfiction book that I have to talk about, I actually didn't read, but I listened to my first ever audiobook, and that was The View from the Cheap Seats by Neil Gaiman, which is a collection of various nonfiction like essays and introductions that he has compiled together over the years. I'm not the biggest Neil Gaiman fan. I've only ever read Coraline and American Gods, but I do have to say I came away from this liking him. I mean, he has a very excellent voice. Like, it is just this like delicious British accent. So I have to say, having the audiobook experience really added a lot to this book. I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it just reading it on its own. But I liked getting to know Neil. I spent 15 hours with him in my car. So, at some points I was like a little sick of him. I was like, oh, shut up, Neil. Like, this collection got a little repetitive. But, now that it's over, I look back on it fondly. So, I enjoyed him telling me about his upbringing and how books were very important to him, as well as he taught me a lot about science fiction books and fantasy books and comics that I would really like to check out. I'm pretty new to a lot of those genres, and he gave me a lot of excellent recommendations. He also had some interesting essays about music, so I liked hearing his thoughts on Lou Reed and Amanda Palmer, of course, his wife, who I'm a big fan of as well. So, yeah, I came into this not really knowing anything about Neil Gaiman. Now I feel like I know him pretty well, so even though this collection can be repetitive, I am very glad I listened to it on audio, and overall I had a good time. So that is it for the month of March. Thank you so much for watching, and please let me know if you have any good audiobook suggestions, because like I said, that was my first one ever, and I did really enjoy the experience. So if you know any good ones, or if you think an audiobook is better than a book in a certain situation, please let me know down in the comments. Thank you. Goodbye.